How's it going, everyone? Welcome to Blind MTG and our very first ever Commander deck tech. Today we are going to be covering Ghalta Primal Hunger. Before we jump into all this, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know of cards that I may not have mentioned or that I should add into my deck. All that good stuff, let me know down below. Ghalta Primal Hunger is a mono green commander, and he costs 10 green and is a legendary creature, Elder Dinosaur. And the card reads, this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total power among creatures you control. Trample 12/12. Alright, this guy is a big boy. He is mono green, but I personally own one of these Ghalta decks, and I feel that he has a bit more flavor and is a bit more style than, let's say, Omnath, Locus of Mana, for example. Because to me, personally, whenever I think of a green mono color commander, I think of Omnath, and I feel like a lot of other people do as well. Well, Ghalta is a perfect replacement for that if you don't want to run kind of the run-of-the-mill green deck. So the first category we're going to start out with is lands, and you may think that lands in a monocolor deck may not matter, but in fact, it's pretty much the opposite. Monocolor means that you have more room to run utility lands, and the first land we're going to talk about is Homeward Path. Homeward Path taps for colorless, but you can also tap it, and each player gains control of all creatures they own. Now, this card is great because it ensures that you get to keep a Ghalta. It would be really bad if someone were able to steal this and then swing it back at you. Now, this is an expensive land, so I wouldn't necessarily say it's a must-have in the deck, but it could definitely save you in a lot of tricky situations. Now, the next land we're going to talk about is Rogue's Passage, and this land is an absolute must-have in this deck. It's an absolute all-star. It only costs 70 cents, and this card reads, tap it for a colorless, or pay for it and tap it, and target creature cannot be blocked this turn. Now, one way to build Ghalta is Voltron. You could definitely do it that way. And this card pretty much just turns on that whole strategy. Not being able to block Ghalta, that's a 1-2 punch essentially, because you're taking 12 commander damage the next turn. It's just insane. You can even put Infect on this and just one-shot someone right away. Another way to ensure that Ghalta gets through and gets that commander damage is by playing Labyrinth of Scophos. With Labyrinth of Scophos, you can tap it for colorless, or you can pay 4 and tap it to remove target attacking or blocking creature from combat. So if there's someone who has an indestructible creature or something with death touch, this is a good way for Ghalta to still get through and get in that 12 damage at least. Now we're going to move on to ramp. With Ghalta, of course, being in green, it is incredibly easy to ramp, but also things like Llanowar Elves and Llanowar Tribe cause Ghalta to come out even faster. So Llanowar Elves is a green, 1/1, tap it for a force, or I guess 1 green mana. The reason why this is so good is because with Ghalta, it sees the power of the Llanowar Elves as well. So essentially, you're gaining 2 mana instead of 1. With Llanowar Tribe, it's essentially a Llanowar Elves, but tripled. So you pay green, and cast it, and tap it for green. So essentially with Ghalta, this pays for 6 of his casting cost. We also have Rampaging Balloffs, 4 green for 6/6 trample. It has landfall. Whenever you play a land, create a 4/4 beast creature token. So this ramps out Ghalta, instantly makes him a 2-drop, but also this kind of incentivizes you to build up more creatures. This doesn't have to be a Voltron style deck. There have, yes, been many times in games where I've played Ghalta for 2 mana across casting them maybe 4 times, and by having all these creatures, by going wide with either tokens or big stompy creatures, you can always ensure Ghalta will come out for 2 mana even with commander attacks. Cards like Verdant Force or Tendershoot Dryad also can ramp out Ghalta consistently. Verdant Force costs 5 green, is a 7/7, and it has, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, create a 1/1 Saproling token. Tendershoot Dryad pretty much does the same thing, but the reason why this is so good is because you have a big beefy creature to ramp out Ghalta, but you're also continuously creating tokens to get him out even faster. In a monocolored deck, you also want to take advantage of the medallions, and that's no exception for the Ghalta deck. You definitely want to run Emerald Medallion. Emerald Medallion reads, green spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. It's a 2-drop and is an artifact. It's absolute must-have in this deck. It is so good. It can ramp you out like nobody's business. Absolute must-have in the deck. Now with a deck like Ghalta, the game plan is pretty simple. You want to create a bunch of creatures, create Ghalta, and swing in for a bunch of damage. You really want to pack this deck with a bunch of good stuff creatures. That's really the main meat of this deck, with creatures like God Eternal Ronas, Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsisma, Managorger Hydra, and Omnath, Locust of Mana. And these are just a few suggestions. You can find much more budget options, such as Aggressive Mammoth, which reads 3 green, that's the casting cost, and it is an 8/8 and it has trample, and all of your other creatures get trample. Something that really buffs your creatures and gets a lot of damage through. Still pretty cheap card. You don't need something like Omnath. Another great card that just recently came out is Arasta of the Endless Web. It costs 2 green, is a 3/5, and has reach, and it reads, whenever your opponents cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. Arasta is a really good way to make sure that your life doesn't go down to 0. It protects you from flyers, which green has trouble doing a lot of times, and it gives you a lot of blockers on the ground as well. Furthermore, you can even use them to, again, ramp out Ghalta. So let's say you have all these big giant creatures and you have Ghalta, and you're going to swing in for a bunch of damage. Well, you need a way to draw all these cards, and the first way to do that is with Guardian Project. A very cheap card, reads 3 and a green, is enchantment. Basically it reads, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, draw a card. The text is much longer, but you can read it. It's right there on the screen. This is a really good card to draw you a bunch of cards. You're going to be playing a lot of creatures anyway. Obviously, you're not going to have any token creatures. Not many at least, because it's a commander, singleton. So this will draw you a lot of cards. Must have in pretty much any green deck. Any deck that has green, you want to play this. Green and a lot of creatures. You can also run Soul of the Harvest, 4 green. It's a 6/6 with trample, and it reads whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield, you may draw a card. Pretty much a even more budget version of Guardian Project. It's a nice beefy creature, ramps out Ghalta, and draws you a card when you play him. So why not throw this in the deck? Another great card is Rishkar's Expertise, 4 green, sorcery, and it reads, draw cards to the greatest power among creatures you control. You may cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying the mana cost. Not only will this draw you a bunch of cards, especially if you have Ghalta out, but you can also ramp out a card from your hand onto the battlefield. Or I guess that would be cheating out a card. But essentially, this will draw you a lot of cards. If you have Ghalta out and he's not even buffed, you're drawing 12 cards and playing a 5-drop or less for free. There's so much value, and this really isn't too steep of a mana cost because you're green, you're going to have a bunch of mana, and around turn 6 is really when you're going to start wanting to refill your hand. So this is a great card to add in. Another great card draw to add in this deck is Lifecrafter's Bestiary. It's an artifact, costs 3 mana, and it reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, scry 1. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay green to draw a card. There's not really much to be said about this card. It's just another good kind of whenever you play a creature, draw a card. Great card to have in the deck. When people see Ghalta enter the battlefield, they're going to want to destroy it right away. Path of Exile, with the Swords to Plowshares, whatever it may be, they're going to want to get rid of it. You need to have ways to protect Ghalta, and a great way of doing that at an affordable price is Blossoming Defense. Cost a green, gives your creature 2/2, and it makes your creature hexproof. Furthermore, it is an instant, so let's say someone goes to Swords to Plowshare, you can respond by using Blossoming Defense. It's a great card to have if you want to hold up mana, just in case someone's going to sneak in there with something to get rid of Ghalta or another creature that you have. Another great card is Veil of Summer. Again, costs just a green mana, and it reads, draw a card if an opponent has cast a blue or black spell this turn. You and permanents you control gain hexproof from blue and black until end of turn, and spells you cast cannot be countered until end of turn. I would call this a great budget heroic intervention, to be honest. Heroic Intervention obviously goes in this deck, but Veil of Summers really can get you out of a pinch at the last moment for a very cheap price. Now the last category we're going to have is general good stuff cards to have. Obviously you're going to be wanting to play a lot of creatures in this deck, because that's pretty much what Ghalta says right there on the card. But there are a lot of other cards you can use to spice up this deck, kind of make it your own, and here's what I've added to my own deck to kind of make it unique. My first card is Kulfener's Urn. It's an artifact and costs 3. It reads, whenever a creature with toughness 4 or greater is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may exile it. At the beginning of the next end step, not yours, but the next end step, if 3 creatures have been exiled with Kulfener's Urn, sacrifice it and return those creatures to the battlefield. I really love this card because it's essentially protection from a board wipe. It won't save all of your creatures, but it'll save the big ones. Like, you can even have Ghalta die to this, or your other big creatures that really are making your deck hum to begin with, return them to the battlefield. It's like nothing ever happened. Another great card is Fire Shrieker. It's an artifact equipment, costs 3, and equipped creature gets double strike. That's all it reads. And it costs 2 to equip. This card is great because if you already have Ghalta on the field and he doesn't have Summoning Sickness, you can play this, attach him, and just catch someone off guard and pretty much one-shot them unless they have blockers. But there's a lot that cannot block a 12/12 trample double strike. A new card I got is Nessian Boar, and it's 3 green to cast it, and it's a 10/6, and it reads, all creatures able to block Nessian Boar do so. Whenever Nessian Boar is blocked by a creature, that creature's controller draws a card. Now overall, Ghalta Primal Hunger is a great commander to start out with. It's a mono-colored, which means land mana base is very, very cheap, and there's really not a wrong way to build this deck. You can go wide with tokens, try to make it a Voltron style, or even do a mix of the two, kind of how I do it in my deck. And speaking of that, if you do want to see my deck, I'll be posting that in the description down below. And that just about wraps up this deck tech for Ghalta. This is my very first deck tech, so if you guys do have any constructive criticism, please let me hear it down in the comments. I really want to keep making these videos to the best of my abilities in the best way possible. But I do hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Now, the first part of the deck we're going to talk about is lands. And you may think that lands in this deck may not matter much because it is a monocolor deck, but you'd be surprised. And the first card we're starting with is Rogue's Passage. Rogue's Passage? Return all creatures opponents control to... I'm so bad at this. Yeah, Dixie, I'm doing a video and I'm doing awful at it. But you can also tap it, and I forget.